So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay, and this is, I guess, something that we haven't really seen ever, kind of, and that is a reimagining of Hobbiton. Now, obviously, the centre of what makes Hobbiton what it is should be pretty familiar to anyone who has played any variant of Third Age, really, over the years, because this is largely unchanged, albeit one feature that Hobbiton always had was that it was surrounded on all sides and relatively exposed. But that's not going to be the case this time around. We are going to be able to see them dug into the hillside a little bit more, and the attackers come from one direction specifically. But also there are the prospect of reinforcing armies and ambush armies that are going to be fighting alongside the hobbits here as they defend their hobbit holes. So yeah, a reimagining of this map is probably something which has, been in the works for, or should have been in the works for quite a while, to be honest, because it's one of those custom maps which pretty much all of them at this point that were in the game initially have had some sort of overhaul now, except for Minas Tirith, which came kind of fully formed anyway. But Hobbiton, it's been a long time coming, really, before we've been able to see this. But yeah, this one was given to me by Tommy over there, so big thank you to him. He's going to be playing as one of the Hobbit armies today. And of course we have got the encampment over here also, which this should also be familiar to anyone who has played, in particular Divide and Conquer, because this is one of the basic orc settlements that you'll see over there. So when you're besieging down all of this hostile terrain, you'll often see something like this and have to try and wrest control of it away. So there's a little bit of an attack-defense thing going on both sides once again on this map, so that should be interesting to behold, to say the least, and also the interplay between all of the attacking, defending and reinforcing armies is also going to be fairly interesting as well. So we'll start off with the attacking armies first and foremost, with the ones that are going to be moving towards Hobbiton itself right from the off, starting off with Ricky Beagle, who is going to be playing as a Rhudaur army. Rhudaur's main strengths around their armour piercing will not be too important when it comes to trying to deal with the hobbits, but then this is one of those situations where both of these two armies are pretty numbers focused in terms of their effectiveness with their infantry anyway. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two actually go up against one another. Of course, the fact that Rhudaur are having to attack into a force that have got some pretty nasty skirmishers waiting in the wings is potentially a bit of a problem for them because of their relatively low armour scores. We've got the Rhudaur swordsman, we've got the Rhudaur clansman, as you would expect. They do have the armour upgrades, that will make them a little bit more resilient against a lot of the hobbit archers in particular, and the big shields as well. Rhudaur swordsmen here more for their numbers, going to be important as they try to swarm over the hillside to overwhelm the defenders here. Now, Rhudaur's throwing projectiles are going to be one of the main things which the blue team are going to be concerned with, because of course it's the main vector with which they deal damage most of the time. The Atomor's Troll Hunters, if they get into a good position to start throwing javelins into especially some of the more important units of hobbits, I imagine we'll see Proudfoot Protectors and the like, that will be a real problem for them. We've got some Rhudaur marksmen here as well. It's one of those situations where you'd imagine the defenders are going to have a pretty hefty advantage when it comes to being at range, because superior terrain, the hobbits have got some decent archers in their selection as well. But still, Rhudaur will be able to respond in kind, and the hobbits aren't known for having good armour across the board, so that should allow even a faction like Rhudaur to do some good damage with their archers. Some Rhudaur Axemen for some extra damage. We also have the Coldfell Maidens, which is an interesting inclusion. Again, javelins on horseback, so they're going to give them a bit of mobility, as well as, of course, more throwing projectile power. We've got the Arthedain Berserkers over here with their own throwing axes, and this is the sort of unit which the hobbits will struggle with, because they don't really have any really high-end infantry, dedicated infantry like this, of their own. So when it comes down to quality like that, the attackers will be feeling pretty good about their chances. Arthedain Pikemen, they're going to be there to anchor the army in place, and the Witchram Enslavers with their tridents are going to be trying to do their thing as well with their quality. Rhudaur Axemen on this flank also. Another force that's going to be heading directly through the middle of the map to attack is going to be the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, played by Colonel Speaks 46. Again, very, very numerous, the Misty Mountains. The Goblins against the Hobbits, what a matchup. We've got the Moria Spear Guard, I should say. They're going to be leading the way. Again, the armour piercing, which is normally their sort of little bit of an extra boost that they get, is not necessarily going to be the most important thing against the hobbits. But again, decently shielded. The numbers are going to be important here as well. Black Orcs of the Mountains, it's one of those situations where a unit like this could actually carry the day potentially, depending upon how the defenders set themselves up on the hillside, because it's the sort of unit which can outperform pretty much everything in the basic roster that the Shire have. Warrior halberdiers as well. Polearms always going to be a useful thing for attackers and defenders alike. Goblin War Engine and Cave Troll Drummers and Cave Trolls all in one blob. I mean, the Goblin War Engine could be particularly devastating here, as much as they are no longer surrounded on all sides, the hobbits, as they defend their home. It's still a pretty exposed hillside, so stuff like projectiles, but in particular artillery, could be a real problem for them. And then some Goblin Kingsguard at the back. The rest of his army looks to be potentially going to the aid of the encampment as we see it. So we've got the White Oak Fearmongers, another unit of the Cave Trolls, another unit of the Spear Guard, and also some Warg Skirmishers as well for that mobility, and their Javelins of course as well. So they're going to be moving to try and relieve the encampment with which this attack has begun. And finally we have Joey Wan Kenobi, who's playing as Angmar. This is going to be a pretty scary force for the hobbits to deal with, because they're not exactly known for being a heavyweight force. Angmar most certainly are. Maybe not so much the Angmar Marauders here, just here for their numbers, but stuff like the Guardians of Kharn Doom and the Witchrealm Pikemen as we see it. No armour upgrades, but they don't need them in this sort of situation to be as effective as we know they can be. Going to be a very difficult force for the hobbits to get rid of, unless they can use their monstrous infantry, their crossbows and their throwing projectiles to their absolute maximum. But other than that, they may be hoping for the reinforcements to come in and save them from Angmar more than anything else. Again, those Witchrealm Pikemen, a decent number of them as well. Trolls of Angmar, who do have the armour upgrades, they're going to be a potential problem also. The hobbits don't really have the muscle in melee to be able to take these guys down quickly. The skin changers could do so, the equivalent in that faction, but we'll see if they've brought them. 2 units of the Blackwatch Legion. We mentioned how they're a little bit lightweight, maybe the hobbits. I mean, the Blackwatch Legion could certainly expose that. 2 units of the Witchrealm Blackguard and a unit of the Witchrealm Inquisitor, so this is a very scary army, certainly of all the attacking forces on the outside, the scariest that we've seen. We've got the Trolls of Angmar here as well. It looks like we've got some reinforcements in the trees, some Scourge Raiders and some standard Warg Riders from Mevon, and I would imagine that's true over here as well. So yes, Mevon's force, and then the rest of his is going to be within the encampment, immediately under pressure. I mean, unlike his allies who are going to be marching mostly towards Hobbiton itself, he's going to have to try and hold down the fort at home in the encampment. We've got Angmar Marauders, we've got Orc Fellers, we've got Angmar Halberds, so more of a lower end force tasked with guarding the encampment as all of their elite mates go off to have all the good times in the settlement. Again, we've got some more Snaga Archers, some Orc Fellers. Do have some Witchrealm Hammerguard in here as well, which is going to be a potential problem for the blue team over here. Gundabad Guard, Orc Fellers as well, and then some more Gundabad Guard over here, and Angmar Marauders. They do have some Trolls in here as well, so not completely low end, but certainly nowhere near as potent as the Angmar force, which is going to be approaching the settlement a little bit more directly. So the force which is going to be laying siege to this encampment immediately is going to be the Arthedain force under Flame of Arnor's command. So some Arthedain spears with the armour upgrades here, and some Arthedain men-at-arms. Again, basic though they may be against the vast majority of forces within this Orc encampment, they will suffice for dealing with them, I would suggest. They've also got some pikes as well to help hold things down, some defenders of Fornost who will be excellent at dealing with pretty much anything in the fortress, and for any that come outside, we have the mighty Knights of Annúminas. They're going to be particularly deadly at charging into enemy infantry, of course, and it'll be interesting to see later on how well they can get utilised as well, if they can dodge the wargs, because they could make for an excellent relief force for the hobbits as well. Hammer and anvil strikes will be very, very juicy. We've got some Arthedain spearmen, some marksmen as well, so they're going to be able to shoot some volleys into the encampment too. More men-at-arms, more defenders of Fornost. This time instead of the cavalry they have the High Lords of Annúminas, which are one of the very best sword and board units in the game as well, so they're going to be also pretty darn good against most anything in the settlement. The Hammer Guard may be the only thing to give them pause. Again, some Arthedain marksmen, spearmen and Arthedain men-at-arms. They're going to be able to hit every side, but Arthedain are going to have to do this job on their own, which is worth saying. Dunedain cavalry, so some throwing axes. The cavalry might be the thing they want to maybe interrupt reinforcing armies from, such as with the goblins. We've got the Arthedain spearmen, more pikemen, and pretty much every side has got one specialty unit as well, the Wardens of the North on this side, with their armour-piercing arrows. Now, the reinforcing army, which we will see later on, the Elves of Imladris under Arbiter's command. I mean, this is also going to be a scary-looking army when we go through what it actually has in its makeup. Elder Spearmen. So this is the kind of force which even that very potent Angmar army is going to be worried about. Again, having 4 units of Elder as the initial wave is very, very scary. And then in behind them, we have upgraded Imladris Guardians, plenty of cavalry as well, the Riders of the Bruinen, so plenty of these Horse Archers, and also the Elder Lancers. So again, the wide open spaces that are included in this map are also going to be very important. We've got Imladris sentries on both sides. So yeah, this is going to be one of the linchpins behind the blue team's hopes of winning this one, really, because of the amount of quality bound up in this one army. Elder Swordmasters here en masse as well, and some Elder Archers also. So again, plenty of Elder plenty of high-end units. There's really no filler here. There's none of the basic Imladris units. Use of the cavalry is still going to be important, though. If the attackers can shut that down, then they could be in trouble, because quite a lot of their power is bound up in that. And now, for the Hobbit armies, we have CBE Craft, Longbottom Mob, so this sort of winding approach through the ruins and into central Hobbiton, marshalled by throwing projectiles, hobbitry and arms. Of course, many of the hobbits can hide, so that's going to be something which they know where they're going to be, really, so it's limited in its utility on this occasion, but there's no denying the fact that it does give you just that little bit of extra time, potentially, to catch the enemy unawares. Then we've also got some Banderbrass archers marshalling the Brandywine. We have got some more hobbits, some more Longbottom Mob. We've got the battling Brandybucks, which are going to be the linchpin behind the defence, really, because the armour piercing will be useful against the Orcish attackers, less so against the men of Rhudaur, but still, many of the Orcish attackers are still going to feel the sting of those wood axes and mallets that the hobbits have hastily grabbed from their tool sheds. We've got some Banderbrass archers up on the hill. Here are the Proudfoot protectors. Again, very, very important. I mean, to be fair, I think the Hobbit's main role really is just going to be trying to hold out against the superior attacking force, while the very elite elves, and then potentially as well some of the Arthedain cavalry, can come and bail them out. The Gandalf's fireworks left behind from his last visit are going to be up here on the hillside. Good overwatch as well, but they do need to worry about friendly fire, of course, if they're firing near their own front lines. But on the approach, they could be very, very effective. And we've also got a second unit of them up here as well, so guarding both approaches. And then further down, as we head into the vegetable patches and gardens, we've got more battling Brandybucks, more hobbitry and arms as we move across into Tommy's army. Probably a similar sort of thing with some Tookish hunters, hobbitry and arms guarding the bridge. We've got some more battling Brandybucks, a little bit more spread out over here, so that could be a little bit of a concern. Longbottom Mob there, because that just makes them a little bit more likely to be able to be overrun completely. But battling Brandybucks, hobbitry and arms, again, the numbers of the hobbits are not exactly wanting. So we've got Tookish hunters circling the wagons in a defensive position over here, more Proudfoot protectors, hobbitry and arms, yeah, battling Brandybucks. I mean, there's not really too much in the way of regular infantry that the hobbits have. I am noticing that there's no skin changes, so that does deprive them of really the main damage spike they have in melee, but it would perhaps be not appropriate for Hobbiton to have skin changes just wandering around the marketplace. Banderbrass archers, Longbottom Mob, yeah, pretty much what you'd expect, more battling Brandybucks and hobbitry and arms. So, I will make a small cut. In fact, I don't know if I even will do that. I think we will just get right on with things, because I think we're going to get underway pretty quickly in multiple areas of the battle. The attacks are probably going to advance towards this location pretty quickly. Arthedain going to be hitting that encampment in short order as well, I would imagine. So, without further ado, let's get this show on the road, shall we? So I think probably the most vulnerable part of the Hobbit's defence is going to be over here, because they're a little bit more spread out, and also the enemy are a little bit closer, whereas within Hobbiton proper, they do have a few more options when it comes to really digging in. Over here, though, it's also going to be a test of some individual units and how long they can hold out because of the amount of ground that they have to cover. The main thing that's going to be in their favour here, perhaps, is the fact that they do have the ability to do pretty good damage at long range, and this is Rhudaur as well, who are the least equipped, really, to be dealing with this aspect of the Hobbit army. Certainly wasting no time in moving forwards, though, Rhudaur. Spears in front, swordsmen just in behind, and then the two-handed axemen in behind them. Yeah, spreading out, going to be attacking from two different angles with pretty much a good 2/3 of the army. But also wasting no time when it comes to opening up on the forces as they move forward, and yeah, going after something like the Rhudaur Axemen is definitely the call here. Vulnerable as they are, and you can see that already they're going to try and get around some of these areas, but again, all of these Hobbiton arms that were hiding can now pop out of hiding. It's going to be a tough ask though. In fact, I think, to be honest, this is going to be a situation where we want to go to half speed, because there's going to be quite a lot happening early doors here. Hobbiton arms going to be moving in there, and then the long bottom mob, of course, they're going to be doing some pretty consistent damage and going after the Arthedain Rangers. Meanwhile, over here, we've got the reinforcements coming from the Goblin army, turning around to perhaps try and bail out their forces against the Arthedainian push. Evan's Angmar army waiting within the encampment. Arthedain moving forward, but again, I mean, this is a pretty decent reinforcing army, you have to say. Warg skirmishers could be a real pain. Mountain Orc berserkers are going to be particularly dangerous against some of the rank and file that Arthedain do have to work with. But meanwhile, back over here, yeah, trying to push their way up to the high ground. Again, silencing these skirmishers is going to be the order of the day for Rhudaur, for the reasons that we've already mentioned. Fair amount of units over here. I mean, they do have Brownfoot Protectors over on the other side, as well as Tookish Hunters, so they will be able to get used out of at least some of their skirmishers here, the Hobbits, but it's a question of how many and how many kills can they get on Rhudaur. It's a decent portion of Tommy's army after all, so they do need to leave a dent in Rhudaur, otherwise if they're too healthy, they're going to be able to push onwards towards Hobbiton, and then the reinforcements may be too late. Battling Brandybucks, Tookish Hunters firing in here as well. The advance, meanwhile, through the ruins on this side of the Hobbit village. Again, these narrow passageways are going to be a little bit easier to hold on to perhaps, but the sheer weight of force that we already mentioned from that Angmar army is going to be tough. The Shire will be very reliant on crossbows and throwing projectiles to be able to get the most out of that, and then of course there's the small matter of those goblin numbers also getting involved as well. Knights of Illuminus going after the Mountain Orc Berserkers is probably the best choice. Charging into them will certainly reduce the amount of damage that those Berserkers can do. Wardens of the North might be getting caught cold a little bit as well, but two of the gates under pressure from the Arthedain push. The other two will join in on that as well, especially considering the reinforcements from the Elves will arrive at some point later on. You would imagine that really the encampment is kind of doomed, and Mevan's job is to simply hold on for as long as possible with a little bit of this support coming in from the Misty Mountains. White Uruk Fearmongers could be a problem for the Arthedainian foot soldiers. But of course the flip side on this is Hobbiton is going to be under some real pressure as well. Gundabad Guard now coming out of the settlement in addition to the cave trolls. The other gate being brought low. But yeah, standard Arthedain men-at-arms are not going to enjoy being in melee against the cave trolls, that's for sure. Again, who's going to get the more efficient end of these engagements? Trolls as well. Goblins overlapping, and then there's javelins also. Arthedain spearmen on the way across, but a little bit of a hairy situation this for Arthedain on that engagement, but they are clearing up what remained of this force over here, ready to move into the settlement perhaps a little later on. Over here meanwhile, Hobbiton arms marching forwards. I mean, it's only a matter of time surely before Rhudaur completely overrun this position here. Banderbrass archers turning around as well. I mean, a lot of kills being scored. The Tookish Hunters would have been the main source of that. A lot of these Rhudaur forces are dead now. Only 31 of their bulkier spears are left. Not many of the Rhudaur Axemen at all, and they're wavering in the face of what remains. Battling Brandybucks, a similar force. I mean, the Longbottom mob were caught in melee by this unit of swordsmen that managed to push their way through the lines, but now they're going to have to deal with point-blank arrows and a unit of Hobbiton arms in melee as well. Shaken as well. Rhudaur's morale is not bad for an evil men faction, so perhaps a bad sign if that's what is starting to transpire. But this position over here, you can see already lots of kills being scored on the Angmar Marauders. Guardians of Khan Doom moving in as well, but then this isn't too surprising given the narrow nature of this defensive position. Trolls moving forward as well. And then the Misty Mountains, I mean, there's more Angmar Marauders over here. Taking the lead fully, really. Misty Mountains happy to hang back for the time being, but not going hell for leather for now, the attackers over here. Trying to just gain maybe a little bit of an advantage, and then when the Hobbit numbers in melee are weak enough, maybe then the flood will happen. I mean, the trolls will definitely force the issue, because the Hobbits really don't have anything that are going to be capable of dealing with trolls of Angmar in melee. And even their ranged units are not going to be too great at dealing with them. Longbottom Mob being forced away by some form of skirmisher. More Hobbitry and arms pushed forwards, but I mean, again, not going to be ideal. I mean, throwing projectiles and crossbow bolts will do the business, but trolls being the weird kind of unit that they are, can be a little bit difficult to kill off quickly with such methods. Turkish hunters firing in. The Longbottom Mob. I mean, at the very least, you can scarcely miss. If you don't hit a troll, you will hit a standard orc. Get some kills there. Good choice of targets. Meanwhile, Arthedain, Wardens of the North, firing away at the Warg skirmishers, zoning them out. Knights of Innuminus have taken losses, which isn't too surprising given the fact there's been spears from Angmar and the Misty Mountains over here, and Mountain Orc Berserkers are not too bad in that regard either, but Arthedain do seem to be struggling here with the sally out from Angmar. Pikes getting harangued by these Trolls of Angmar as well. The ideal unit to break up those phalanx formation units. Do have some Arthedain Men-at-Arms around again, but not the kind of high damage units that you need in this sort of situation. Defenders of Fornost would be ideally placed. Wardens of the North will be firing in. Arthedain spears going after the Wargs, after the Knights of Innuminus closed in on them in melee. I mean, the thing is, they may be counter-attacking out of the settlement, or well, I say settlement, camp now, but the rest of the Arthedain army is now moving forward to put some pressure on. Dunedain cavalry will surely bring about the ultimate end of the Wargs. Dunedain Troll Slayers are an important unit as well. High Lords of Innuminus. Again, they maybe need to start putting some pressure on the other side of the settlement, because they're almost doomed, really, from this side. Warg skirmishers are routing as a result of the spears. Knights of Innuminus chasing them. Only 9 of them remain, however. But this pocket of Arthedain infantry is not going to last too much longer either. Meanwhile, still resistance being put up over here. Again, the inevitability of the Rhudaur victory in this little section of the map was always going to happen based on the initial setup, but Tommy's army has lasted a little longer perhaps than Rhudaur would have wanted them to. The sooner Rhudaur can start putting some pressure on Hobbiton alongside Angmar and the Misty Mountains, the sooner they can start making real inroads, because the timer is ticking. That very strong Elven army is going to arrive at some point, and the attackers need a decent advantage, positionally and numbers-wise, by the time that happens. And they are on their way to doing that in the encampment fight, I think, because Arthedain haven't really had things their own way either. But the Shire will be a little bit more happy with how things have gone thus far. Outfit Protectors. Ooh, and here we see a far more robust attack now. Again, the Trolls in the vanguard there were always going to be a concern. There is a lot of dead units from the attackers over here, though. But the Trolls are still very much alive. Yeah, the Blackwatch Legion being sent forward. Only 10 of them remain, but they forced what remained of the Hobbit defensive lines back. And that was their entire job. Black Orcs of the Mountains trundling forwards. Warrior Spearguard. Hobbits as well. Another line of them. Again, we've got to think about the attack from 2 directions now. Warrior Spearguard are routing in the face of all of the stones thrown by the Longbottom mob. Hobbitry arms, it says victory seems certain, so that goes to show how much heavy lifting the supporting units from the Hobbits are really doing, and this crossfire is pretty brutal. Witch-round Blackguard forwards here as well, but on the minimap, as we can see, the Elves are on the move. And they are going to head to the encampment first, which I think is probably the right call. Arthedain struggling a little bit to get things done over here. Eldarenway Lancers moving forwards. Riders of the Bruinen getting caught though. So far I think the use of the wargs has probably been better than the use of the horses, but that may very well change considering the Elves are now arriving. Lancers down, warg skirmishers and scourge raiders. Going to be decent enough in melee though, so it's not going to be the easiest engagement for the Eldarenway Lancers to handle. Yeah, as soon as that Elven infantry arrives, along with Arthedain, they can finally clean things up over here, I would suggest. But how long they take to do that is going to be fairly key as well, because the Hobbits will not have an infinite lifespan, for sure. Goblin infantry and trolls still very much alive. I mean, surely the Riders of the Bruinen can be used to set up some nasty crossfires. And the wargs don't have the best armor values. They do get caught though, sideswiped by the Scourge Raiders. Continues to move around. I mean, they did sally out, but now they're going to go back into defensive shape, which is understandable when the Elven cavalry is buzzing around. You don't really want to be giving them the opportunity to charge. Warg Riders struggling against the superior number of the Eldarenway Lancers. Angmar Marauders routing. Yeah, Riders of the Bruinen firing once again, dealing with those throwing axes. More Warg Riders though. Mevan's reinforcements. The Wargs lurking in the trees have arrived. Again, there are a lot of them, but again, this is where having that high number of Riders of the Bruinen is going to be key. Eldarenway Lancers do get the charge, but that's a full health unit of wargs. It's going to be fairly tough. Arthedain breaking down the gates. I think over here, Coldfell Maidens now moving forwards. And some Longbottom mob are fleeing. Rhudaur finally do have their victory over here, and they will be able to push forwards over the Brandywine Bridge, hunting down some of these units that are trying to flee. The Witchram Inquisitors, Tookish Hunters. So Tommy not going to be able to save too much. You can see in the distance as well the impacts from the Gandalf's fireworks from on top of the hill. I mean, there's the danger of friendly fire, but it's far more likely they're going to be able to hit the enemy. Indeed, getting some good hits on stuff like Witchround Pikemen, dangerous kind of unit. Again, it just lets the attackers know that they do need to kind of pick up the pace, really. Blackwatch Legion taking point blank hits from the Longbottom mob, so the second unit of them moving forward to try and push through the next defensive line, which is going to be successful, but it is also going to be costly once again. The Trolls should probably be committed forwards also. The Goblin War Engine could be a real menace, although I think the Hobbits are spread out enough on the hill to the point where it's unlikely to be truly devastating, but we'll see. Could also see some counter-artillery work from one of the two Gandalf's fireworks. Probably going to consolidate in this section of the settlement as well, with the rest of Rhudaur's army rapidly approaching also. Cave Trolls now moving forwards. Going to try and finish them off. Meanwhile, Arthedain, again, a bit of a sally out from the Angmar Marauders, although this one is going to be less successful considering it's defenders of Fornost that are waiting for them. Not the kind of matchup that the Orcs would want to see. And then the rest, I mean, the Elven cavalry, oh, there's Dunedain cavalry, some slightly battered Riders of the Bruinen, but for the most part, I mean, there's more Riders of the Bruinen, the Dunedain cavalry, Scourge Raiders moving in. Eldarenway Lancers and the Riders, though, are actually pretty lowly at this point, so Mevan's warg reinforcements may have done the business here. And it looks as though The Elven infantry is not going to join Arthedain in taking the settlement after all, and is instead going to move directly to try and bail the hobbits out. Which again, I mean, dealing with Joey's Angmar army is probably the priority because of the quality that was within it. But this does also mean that late on, perhaps, Mevon's force within the encampment could be the ones that they need to save themselves up to finish off. Arthedain still putting the pressure on, but they're going to try and batter down the palisade. Similar fashion to how the Edoras walls work. But yeah, moving out. They're going to need more reinforcements on the front. I mean, the High Lords of Illuminus will definitely do the business, but even then, I mean, maybe not ideally placed for taking on the trolls. And over here, Guardians of Khan Doom. Try and pikemen on the way forwards. The Blackguard, I mean, yeah, this is a very robust looking attack now. Probably need to be letting loose some of those fireworks once again. Going to be a case of use them or lose them because the trolls are on the way forward. Proudfoots, I'd assume they have used up their ammunition because of the great choice of targets we've seen so far in the battle, but still, pikes in melee, as we've already said, not ideal for dealing with trolls, although cave trolls are the weakest of the bunch, so maybe they'll be okay. Rocket launchers, I guess this one's out of ammunition. Palisade falls. Just in behind the archery targets. They're going to be firing away. And yeah, at this point, with the situation deteriorating, you may as well fire in, even if you do get a bit of friendly fire. The fellow artillery crew routs as a result of that, but yeah, this is a good amount of kills. And the elves are on the cusp of arriving as well, so softening up the attackers as much as possible can only lead to good things, which one Inquisitor's going to be interrupting the Proudfoot protectors, but as soon as those pikes come out, the cavalry isn't going to want to stick around in this particular fight for too long. Train arms. Warrior halberds as well. Bombardment continues. One of the troll drummers gets hit by it. They're pretty big targets, I suppose. It does need to be a direct hit, though. And now, the elves still on the way, but still that slow march. Mevon setting up the defence. Not yet ready to pour in through this new gap that they've made, but Arthedain marksmen firing away. Going after the unshielded orc fellas, which is a good choice. High Lords of Illuminus defeat is a distinct possibility, which is pretty interesting. Only one troll remains. Reinforcements can be committed. But another unit of trolls moving forward. They've been a real problem for the Arthedain infantry to deal with. Scourge Riders. Another hole in the wall potentially. Angmar Marauders, already a little bit depleted, will not be able to defeat the more professional Arthedain men-at-arms. Evan does still have some units further back, but again at this point, my Swordmasters are there. We do have the Coldfell Maidens, the Rhudaur cavalry, going to be trying to make life a little bit difficult for the elves who are now arriving. Angmar about to get sandwiched in between the remaining hobbits on the hill and the elves, although again this is good use of the javelins. Every Elder Enway that they can kill off is a real boon to them at this stage. I've already mentioned how the casualties will add up for the Angmarim. That is also certainly true of the elves. Still, the Gandalf's fireworks doing the business, scoring more and more hits. The trolls actually hitting their own depleted artillery pieces. Rhudaur Tookish Hunters are firing away over on the other side, so there is still a force that Rhudaur are going to have to get through before they can join up with the Orcish attackers over here. Proudfoot's defeat is a distinct possibility, so still the attackers doing the right thing in terms of trying to force their way through and silence all of these skirmishers, by far and away the most dangerous part of the Shire's forces. Elder Spearmen. Swordmasters now God Halim. Firing at point blank, but the shields of the Guardians of Kharndoom will do the business there. They will struggle in melee against everything the Elves have though, but at the very least this is a unit which is preventing Imladris' onward march. Again, all about delay really. For every force except the Elves and I suppose Rhudaur at this stage, everything is about buying time for certain things to happen. Trolls again getting into melee, and once again, Arthedain men-at-arms. A choice of opponent that they will all be all too happy to go up against. Arthedain spears. Still got some ammunition though in the Arthedain marksman, probably still got some throwing axes for the Dunedain cavalry as well. More men-at-arms, some spears. Arthedain marksman still firing in. Again, I think the sheer numbers though of Angmar still in the encampment means that this is a bit of a footnote really. I think Arthedain, if they can just deplete Angmar enough, because of the Elves' decision to more directly reinforce Hobbiton itself, Mavin may very well be the last attacker left standing, but I don't know whether he's going to have enough late on. There's still a long way in this battle to go though. Many events have transpired, but we still have a lot to see yet. Turkish hunters still setting up that crossfire. Band of brass archers over there. They're going to retreat to where the rest of the hobbits are. I mean, at this point, I don't know whether they might actually be better off holding their position against Rhudaur over here, because if they try and retreat, they're going to be ending up in a bit of a mess of a fight against the Orcs, who are already all over the hillside at this point. Firework launchers still, the Turkish hunters and Proudfoot protectors firing away. Yeah, the Elven advance is surely the concern for the Orcs at this point. They're turning around the Witch Realm pikemen to try and stymie this momentum that Imladris do have. But up close, I mean, a lot of these polearms, so a good delaying measure. And over here, the Elves also taking the other narrower route. Unlike the Orcs when they moved through here last, however, they don't have to deal with a load of nasty skirmishers on the hillside. In fact, the Elves are the ones that have actually got range support. A lot of these units are not going to be up to the task of dealing with the kind of force that Imladris are bringing to the table, but again, it's more of a delaying measure. If they can set themselves up on the hillside, if they can kill off the hobbits reasonably fast, maybe that is the answer. The Goblin War Engine can be utilised against Imladris more effectively perhaps than it ever would have been against the hobbits. God Halim in melee, but that won't bother them too much. Guardians of Kharndoom are tough cookies, but not in comparison to this. Again, more Elven support. Flaming shot, so they're going to try and burn the Goblin War Engines. Worthwhile tactic, perhaps? There's no easy shots after all. Bouncing projectiles, but not really hitting anything of note. Meanwhile, further up the hill, I mean, these Witch Realm Inquisitors have been a real problem for the hobbits. Gandalf's fireworks, I mean, they're still pushing them, so they may still have a bit of ammunition, but at this point, you don't want to be firing in down there, because you're going to be hitting Elves more than Orcs, so you definitely don't want to be doing damage to the reinforcements that are here to save you. Cave Trolls slowly dying. So the Proudfoots have got some kills against the Cave Trolls, but the Witch Realm Blackguard are going to be able to finish them off, you would suggest. Some long bottom mob with their Fred Flintstone style clubs, and then the Band of Brass Archers as well. Rhudaur, meanwhile, some Elves have been sent over here to get in the way of Rhudaur's continued advance. This is all well and good, but these Eldarenway are surrounded. Pikes on one side, and the deadly Ferodrim javelins on the other. So this may be a unit lost. I suppose the delaying measure for Rhudaur here, they don't want Rhudaur to be getting involved over here too early. Hobbits managing to surround this force over here, which includes the Witch Realm Enslavers. There are 58 of them though, and you'd have to say that Hobbitry and arms are maybe not the level of quality that would be required to bring them down. More reinforcements. Troll-short axe throwers in their number. The Angmar in general falls at the hands of the Elves. Morale could very much play its part. Joey's army is elite enough, I think, where it might not be too much of a problem, but I mean, Goblin Kingsguard are now moving forwards. Imladris Guardians getting involved. Blackguard's still fighting up the hill. It's definitely a very stretched engagement. A bit all over the place. Which is good for the attackers. It means that they're a little bit more... They're able to spread out the impact of all of that elven quality more so than they would otherwise have been able to do. And this is an important situation as well. Snaga skirmishers getting a good angle to use their javelins on these elven infantry. Pikes on the way forwards. That's going to be a concern as well. The Witch Realm pikemen have been involved in the battle for quite a while and have definitely done their job, but yeah, at this stage, Moria Halberdiers are shaken. The situation does look pretty grim. Runway archers and the god Halim, I think that was, the trail on those projectiles. Goblin Kingsguard, 43 of them remain. I'd assume that's where the Goblin General is as well, and the loss of that would certainly be a problem for the Misty Mountains. Half the enemy force. And then out here in the encampment, Arthedain with a little bit of go forward now. A little bit more of a brawl. Hammer Guard, there'll be a problem. But this is an engagement. Well, there goes Tommy's general. The Inquisitors continuing to be a menace. But this is an ideal situation. I mean, the Hammer Guard finally do get committed forwards, but exposed to the Troll Slayers. And I wondered why they'd taken casualties, and that would certainly have been why. Softened up, and now the Troll Slayers could help to finish them off in melee. By far the scariest unit under Mevan's command. Quite a lot of these halberds still there though, some Gundabad Guard still fighting for the gates, the Gundabad Guard as well. High Lords of Anuminus seem to have been depleted also. So yeah, both sides are going to come out of this looking... Whoever wins is going to be extremely low. Oh, there are the High Lords. Actually 43 is not bad. Sniper archers as well, so maybe Arthedain can actually get themselves over the line here, considering how this engagement has ultimately ended up shaping up. Which puts more pressure on the attackers over here to find some sort of victory against the Elves. Frame rate taking a bit of a nosedive with the veritable mountain of corpses that's over in that narrow section. Surprised the Moria Halberds haven't routed actually, especially now that they're surrounded with the arrival of some hobbits. Defeat seems certain. More elves fanning off over here. Gandalf's fireworks trying to get into position. The enslavers fought their way out of the encirclement, but they're going to struggle now. Only 7 of them remain, and straight into a cluster of prepared pikes. The fireworks. Forward come the Rhudaur Berserkers. Bandabras archers. Going to utilise as much of their ammunition as they possibly can. Some more troll hunters on the way forwards as well. Rhudaur Berserkers. And the troll hunters do have those javelins, but they're going to need to get into position and start utilising that ammunition quickly. Ooh, and point blank. The Goblin General falls. Surely that'll mean some routes from the Misty Mountains. I mean, they're going to hit their own men, but the high quality nature of the Arthedain Berserkers means this is a worthwhile trade, especially seeing as the defenders at this point are in a fairly good position to go on and take this battle by the scruff of the neck. That was the last volley, but a well utilised one, and the Turkish Hunters continuing to... Actually no, Panderbras archers continuing to get some shots off as well, which is good because in melee that is a very lopsided engagement indeed. What remains of the artillery crew, everyone chipping in. Don't know how well they'll do against the Troll Hunters. Still some crossbow bolts in reserve as well. The Elves going to finish off the enslavers. They have been forced off the hillside as well, and full-on counter-attack mode at this point from the Elves. Goblin War Engine are the last ones left over here. And again, you'll scarcely see a more lopsided engagement in terms of quality. So it really is only a matter of time before Hobbiton is re-secured, and then it'll just be the attackers left in the encampment, who are surely not going to have enough left in the tank to be able to deal with what remains of Imladris. That was always the challenge for the attackers in this one, I think. That high quality Imladris army was always a bit like the sword of Damocles hanging over them. They were on a pretty strict timer, to be honest, and I think maybe it just didn't work. Maybe going full hell for leather in with the Blackwatch Legion and full numbers early on instead of that initial moment where they were just testing the waters, maybe that would have been the call to just try and force the issue against the Hobbits, because they ended up taking a lot of casualties anyway. But we'll see. I mean, by its very nature, an Elven army isn't the biggest in terms of numbers, so the losses that they have taken... One Goblin Kingsguard remains against an Eldarenway Swordmaster. It's going to be a lot of clean-up for Hobbiton. I'm surprised actually the Goblin War Engine hasn't routed, especially considering the Misty Mountains have already lost to their general. Not bad at all. Troll Hunters, that's probably the Misty Mountains, who are fully defeated. Panderbras and Eldarenway. This unit of Troll Hunters is pretty much the last thing that remains of Rhudaur's attack on this side of the settlement, which never really... They never joined up their assaults. They got fairly close, but... Again... Never quite able to meet up fully with one another and take the settlement. Tree and arms. And what's going on over here? They do have Rhudaur marksmen, some wargs, some Angmar marauders. So it does look as though they have ultimately been able to defeat Arthedain over here. The numbers in the end proving too much even for the good quality units that Arthedain did have. And indeed there goes the Arthedain general and the Rhudaur general. Double quick time. That Proudfoot protector with the pipe. Little details like that. But yeah, victory. Finally bringing down the Troll Slayers. So just taking stock of what they have. I mean, at the very least, they do have a defensive position they can use with the encampment. They've got the palisades. They can set up engagements as they want. But the issue may be that the Elves aren't going to mind a narrow engagement at all because of the level of quality that they're bringing to the table. And I don't know if these Angmar forces have got the support. I mean, they've got 7 throwing axes, but that's not going to give them the kind of DPS they need. Snagar archers again, not necessarily. Hobbiton cavalry still alive, so they'll be able to play their part. And then defenders of Fornost. 17 remain. Been fighting against these Gundabad Guardsmen for quite a while at this point. But not for much longer. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Scourge Raiders coming outside of the walls now, maybe in an attempt to finish these guys off just that little bit more quickly, but they're backed up against the wall, so there's not really an opportunity to get a really nice charge off. You can see the tower in the distance on the hill as well. Never came to the point of having to hustle up to the very back of Hobbiton for a final stand. Instead, it's going to be the Orcs that make the final stand, the attackers. Still a clutch of resistance over here for Arthedain pikes, so Rhudaur still do have some units. Those delaying units of Elven did their job, and now reinforcements on the way, and this small cluster of pikes is going to be finished off as well. And then it'll just be a case of grouping up what remains of the Elves and the Hobbits to march on the Orc camp. Pikes, even when they're in a little bit of a messy formation like this, the spear wall is going to be doing quite a lot of heavy lifting. Then, when the surround comes in, that is going to flick back the other way. Cavalry on the way over here as well, perhaps as by way of being messengers. The attack has gone poorly for us. We're going to need bailing out. I'm surprised actually there's still Arthedain Rangers left alive, considering they were being targeted fairly early, but that isn't going to last for too much longer now. Engulfed, and there goes the Rhudaur army. And now they must group up. The Elves, who marched all the way over here, have to march all the way back again. But just taking stock of what they have left, I mean, 91 Imladris sentries, 99, I mean, having these pikes, that Angmar are definitely going to need some sort of big, ranged contingent, which I don't think they have anymore, really. Imladris Guardians, 62 God Halim, that is tough. And then Elven, yeah, this quality is, unless Angmar have got some pretty substantial units of hidden skirmishers somewhere, I don't fancy their chances, and I think the only skirmishers they have that can hide are Snagar archers, and even if they did have like 2 full units of them, the DPS is perhaps not there. But stranger things have happened, I suppose. We'll see what Angmar are really made of. Marauders, archers, dead Elven cavalry, which, to be fair, the Elven cavalry, I mean, the infantry has obviously been a real tour de force in this battle, but the cavalry was actually shut down pretty well, I think. I think the wargs got the better of the horses in this battle, but from an infantry perspective, and certainly a skirmishing perspective, that's where the defenders have had their joy. And technically speaking, this is the town centre, I suppose. Does this version of Hobbiton have the town centre? It's in front of Bag End usually, isn't it? Which, no, normally it would be here. Which is another thing about the regular Hobbiton map, which is kind of difficult, because the town centre is like front and centre and very easy for the attackers to get access to, so you kind of have to front load in an exposed position, and that always made it very, very difficult to hold on to effectively. Evan is a little bit spread out, perhaps. Maybe too spread out. Are they going to group up fully? Yeah, I thought so. Just routing units. I mean, there's not a huge amount of the hobbits left, as you would expect, considering the pressure that they were put under early doors. There's still enough of them to be able to contribute. Arthedain completely gone. Captured the enemy's walls. Don't quite know how they've managed that, considering they don't have anyone still attacking. Don't think. What's going on over here? Still a blue Oh, I see. There is some Elven cavalry that has made its way in. Riders of the Bruinen. Fighting evenly with the Wargs, but the Wargs have got that anti-cavalry bonus. Riders of the Bruinen are probably one of the best units to use against the Wargs, but only insofar as using their bows. In melee, they can still do a job, but maybe not as efficiently. Who's going to win this then? 2v2? Wargs now 2v1. I mean, all it would take really is for those halberdiers to turn around and this Elven Rider's toast. Just about one Warg Rider remains, but again, victorious. Showcasing their mounted prowess once more. There's another blue triangle over here. Is this a routing infantry or is this a depleted unit of cav? No, it's definitely a routing infantry. 2 defenders of Fornost. At least they're not routing through the enemy settlement. Tents all set up. Yeah, taking these settlements in the campaigns was always a relatively easy thing to do if you had a good selection of range units because of how open it is. And the AI always has this desire to really box up at the town centre a lot of the time. Like shooting fish in a barrel. That was certainly true during the Divide and Conquer campaigns that I did. Lorien, the Arthedain, and one that I never quite finished with Erebor. Maybe that's something we could return to at some point. Perhaps. Updates have happened since last time I played it, which was a while ago now. Maybe this is an idea. An idea to ponder for another time, though. For now.
Beware! The chance for us to regain control of the city is almost gone.
Whatever you say, announcer. Because technically the town centre is active, but not as a victory condition. So how do they approach this? I mean, I think really they just attack through 2 gates with their quality, and a narrow engagement is fine for them, albeit they, this gate is actually still standing. The sally out did help with that. I mean, it's damaged, but it has not fallen. Imladris Guardians. Hobbit's going to be helping out with this attack over here. I mean, this gate did get felled. So free passage in here. Again, the level of quality. I mean, a pretty healthy unit of Angmar halberds, to be fair. And no real pike presence over here either. Long bottom mob, but they're going to shoot in first. I don't know how necessary that move would be. I guess you don't want your silver thorns to go to waste. Pretty healthy units of Elder Enway. I mean, the archers, not a problem for them to get into melee though either. Heavy Elven archers up close are really not that much worse than the melee focused equivalents. The long bottom mob. Going to fill their boots with a few more kills. Throwing in through the gate, and are they sallying out once again? Or just reorganising their defensive position. I was going to say Mevon's sally outs have worked pretty well in this battle so far, but this is definitely a bridge too far for trying that tactic again, considering the kind of force that Imladris are bringing to the table. Getting the melee engagement underway is definitely in their best interest. Further back, Gundabad Guard on the way forwards. 52 Snaga archers. An elite melee fighting force, to be sure. Get in position perhaps to do some raking shots with those stones of theirs, but I don't know whether they're going to be able to do that. So the elves They're going to have to wheel all the way around to go to this side of the settlement. I don't know whether you can utilise the rams of an army that's not yours. And obviously these were all brought to the battle by Arthedain, so I don't think the elves are going to be able to utilise them. So it's actually a good thing that Arthedain did knock some of the gates down and a few holes in the palisades, otherwise the elves would be pretty stumped at this point. They would have no way to actually engage the enemy. Victory seems certain for the elves though, and this is the problem. I mean, they're going to have to, especially if the elves attack from the other side, like the very limited Angmar resources will be stretched from one side of the camp to the other. Surely it's only a matter of time before these lines falter and fade. Proudfoot protectors. Those crossbows aren't going to have an angle. Launching a few stones in. Again though, the morale has actually held together reasonably well for Angmar, considering the odds that they are facing. Not a bad performance from the attackers in that regard. Proudfoots. Bank up around the town centre, are they? Well, here are the routed Rhudaur units. Perpetually routing in the TC, so I guess the town centre is active, which technically means the red team are the defenders, I suppose. Funny how that works. I think Ricky Beagle actually admitted defeat though, so these guys probably won't be bumped back into activity. The elves can mount the rams, so they will now be able to pour into the settlement from every angle they choose. And yeah, this is exactly what the AI do in those campaigns. Mavin is doing that. He's just piling all of his units up to the town centre and hoping for the best. And well, the best is not going to happen, let's be honest. Simply too many elves. Hobbiton cavalry, so Arthedain just about clinging to life in this battle. Their attack on the encampment ended ultimately in failure, but they did do the business in terms of the damage they needed to. Those Troll Slayers certainly did the work on the Hammer Guard. There's also not enough of the more solid Gundabad Guard left. And that's a bold move. Charging in when there's halberds right there. Yeah, and they rout as a result of that, so that's Arthedain gone. No longer clinging to life in this battle. Run for your lives. Warrior Spear Guard. Perpetually routing as well. Having a look. Yeah, it's going to end just about within that 10% bracket. Look at this. Trying to set up a sort of hedgehog formation with the remaining Angmar halberds. A few orc fellas as well. The wargs are at the back. Almost a perfect triangle, the only thing that's stopping it from being that are the orc fellas really sticking out of both sides. Now they're going to charge in. Longbottom Mob, Eldarinway Swordmasters and Archers. Vanderbrass Archers, the first one's in. Hobbits eager to get things underway in this final confrontation. Then sentries. will bump these guys back into activity. Yeah, they will. They may no longer be active in the fight, but the Misty Mountains and Rhudaur will have to be finished off in the same manner that Angmar are destined to be. Spearman. Balance of forces evenly matched. Not sure about that. Phalanx formation can do an awful lot for you, but in this situation, especially when you consider that the Elves are bringing a superior unit in that regard to the table as well. Sentry's still back there. Still some ammunition by the looks of things. Yeah, God Helene going to be able to fire in as well. Electing to finish off the Troll Hunters. Actually, none of them fell as a result of that. One of Rhudaur's only armoured units showcasing their virtues there. Now they're getting tossed and turned though. Proudfoot's on the way forward. Still some Elven units that haven't been committed. I guess there's no room for more of them to be committed anyway. Arrows falling down from on high. And the cavalry. The remaining wargs finally going to be brought down. Elder Enway Spearmen in the vanguard. Defeat seems certain. Some Gundabad Guard. I mean, 104 of them is not a low number. Again, if the roles had been reversed and maybe if Joey's high quality army had been back here, this would have been an interesting back and forth with the addition of some trolls perhaps, but battle was set up for that to really be the army that had to try and take the settlements as quickly as possible. The final stand. 7% the difference at the moment. And it has been close. I mean, this has been a battle of fine margins. Again, it was all... everything really hinged on Imladris' arrival and what the situation was like when that happened, how much progress the attackers had made, what sort of shape the defenders were in. Ultimately, I think the defenders were able to marshal things very nicely. I think it was also the right call for Imladris to save the hobbits rather than the Arthedain force attacking the encampment, just because then it would have been the other way round. Imladris and Arthedain would have had to attack into Angmar as they dug into a position on the hill, and a higher quality Angmar army than this, whereas this final stand is much easier for the Elves to digest. In melee. More of the silver elves are left instead of the golden ones, but I guess the golds have been used front and centre a little bit more. Scourge Raiders. There we go. So yeah, again, technically I guess the blue team from the game's perspective are the attackers, but it doesn't seem right to call them the attackers in this situation. The blues definitely feel like the defenders more so, but mechanically I suppose, I mean, the battle isn't going to last long enough for the town centre capture to be what ends this. It is overwhelmingly the elves that remain as well as a few hobbits, but they certainly did take some hefty damage from the attack from the Orcs and Rhudaur when it happened, but they did enough damage as well. going to be that. The Hobbit's home has been defended, the invasion thwarted. And a good battle as well. Indeed, well earned. And that's... there we go. So yeah, I think it's an interesting take on Hobbiton, this, because like I said, it's one of those maps that was always crying out for an overhaul, but how do you really do that? Because it's not really meant to be a military location in any sense of the word, so making it a siege that's maybe a little bit more structured is difficult to do while actually maintaining the feel of the map. But this one does it, I think, because it also expands the settlement out a little bit, makes it feel a little bit more vast and complete. And also the fact that there was a little bit of give and take in terms of initially, obviously the blue team were on the defence, but then there's this encampment. There was a lot going on throughout the battle. It was very multifaceted and multi-layered, and that does seem to be a bit of a theme with the battles that Tommy has been making. There's a lot of different aspects to it going on, and that's interesting because it means that different things can affect it in different ways across the battle, and the sort of breadth of results possible as a result of that are pretty varying, shall we say. There was another scenario that I was actually a part of, but unfortunately it crashed towards the tail end, which was kind of similar. I think they are going to try and rerun that one at some point, where it's a Rohan and Lothlorien on the defence with Isengard and Dunland on the attack, and it was, you know, again, it was really good. It was a real shame it crashed towards the end, but it was not dissimilar to this really in terms of how it was working out, and also like different aspects of things happening across the field. So yeah, I quite like this approach to scenario creation, especially when it gives a map that's needed a makeover for some time the love and attention that it deserves, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the performances, we can't actually see the player names, but we can infer who was who. So yeah, the Hobbits doing a good amount of damage. I mean, Imladris actually not getting as many kills as the Hobbits, but then the Hobbits were under pressure immediately and, you know, had to get a lot of kills, otherwise they were going to end up swallowed whole, really, by the Orcish and Wildman attack. And yeah, the key to this battle was definitely Imladris's inexorable advance, really. I think the attackers needed to have made more progress in Hobbiton itself before they ultimately arrived. If they had done that, then they would have been able to dig in a little bit more, you know, done more damage to the Elves perhaps, and then it would have been a different story, because they would have been able to get stuff like the Goblin War Engine into a good position, and then they may still have lost Hobbiton ultimately, but they would have done enough damage to the Elves where maybe the Orcs that remained in the encampment under Mevon's command could have seen them over the line. Whereas here the numbers were pretty similar, but obviously the gulf in terms of quality was far too much for Mevon to be able to pull out a victory by the time it came to those final stages. Obviously they did manage to defeat Arthedain, but that was more a result of the decision that Imladris made to save the Hobbits, really. If they had come to help Arthedain, it would have been an easy task to take the encampment, but it was the right call to make, and ultimately Arthedain did do enough damage as well, and that's really the story of things. The Hobbits and Arthedain were able to do the damage they needed to against their opponents for the Elves to be able to ultimately clean up and win the battle overall. So let's see what did the damage for the Hobbits, shall we? I mean, I think, yeah, Proudfoot Protectors, unsurprisingly. One unit doing significantly better than the other, but again, those bolts and then also being pikes in melee is key, and it is always going to be the archers that did most of the heavy lifting. The battling Brandybucks did quite well, though, for a melee unit. That's not too bad, but again, against the rank and file Orcs, they are actually a pretty good choice of unit because of that armor piercing they have. Banderbrass archers, though, cleaning up, over 450 kills, being the best performer there, and Tookish hunters as well, so nothing too out of the ordinary there. As far as over here goes, Banderbrass archers again, Longbottom mob and Proudfoot protectors doing very, very nicely. 555 kills on Tookish hunters, who are a basic archer. That's always a good thing to see. Gandalf's fireworks, 160, 181, so again, good spread of kills, but they also caused some morale issues among the attackers, which definitely helped matters also. It's always a difficult artillery piece to quantify, really, because it's about spread of kills, really, rather than getting those big individual hits that you expect from a trebuchet or a catapult or something along those lines. And yeah, so good performances all round, as you would imagine, based on what we saw from those Hobbit skirmishes, and it's always been the key part of them as a faction, really, anyway. So yeah, big thank you to Tommy for creating this one and allowing me to show it. Big thank you to all the players for making it happen as well. Hopefully we can see the rerun of the other scenario that Tommy has made, the Rohan, Lothlorien, Isengard, Dunland one, because that was an interesting one, and I think the balance was finely tuned on that one too. So we may see that, but the next two that are probably going to be coming out are some, not custom scenarios, but new maps that were made by the Womb Raider. The first of which is going to be an Elven defence on a new map, and the second of which I believe is a Arnorian defence. So kind of similar in the sense that there's cityscapes, but the theme on both is different. But those are probably going to be the next two that we see. Obviously, there is still stuff from the backlog that people like White Dolphin and the Thanatos sent to me as well, which I will get to them. Don't worry, I will get to them. But new maps and new scenarios always take precedent, really, because they're it's brand new stuff that no one's seen yet. So that's why those always bump to the front of the queue. But I have got a system now, a better system for keeping track of everything. So I will be going back to the stuff that I was sent in June and July. So don't worry about that as well. So plenty of content to see us out for the rest of the year, I would suggest. And in the new year, we'll do some reorganising of the channel, I think, to try and get a little bit more out of it now that I'm in a position to do so a little bit more easily. But yeah, enough of my rambling. Big thank you to Tommy and all the players once again. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.